Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting. Sa manluluti, di ka pasisil. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong buhaw. May dalagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng wataw at lu'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di mag-inig. Iba ng araw ng walhati ng sinta, walang isawin mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga atin na pumatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Morning. Hello, I am Dante Fransang, the President and CEO of the Manila Times. Honorable Silvestre Bello III, Secretary of the Department of Labor. Ms. Zoe Diaz de Rivera, IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines. Honorable Ronel Delario, Institute of Labor Studies. Colleagues in the Manila Times, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Manila Times, welcome to today's business forum that focuses on a vital segment of the Philippine economy. While the pandemic has dulled our memories of better times, many still recall the economic significance of the business process outsourcing, or BPO sector, before 2020. The income it generated reportedly matched the financial injections to the economy by remittances from overseas Filipino workers. BPO earnings had grown to about 10% of the total economy, or gross domestic product, and was forecast to continue increasing. The outlook then was that it was poised to surpass the OFW remittances that was already valued at around $25 billion a year. Not surprisingly, the sector in focus today employed some 1.3 million Filipinos in 2020. Of course, what happened next was the emergence of COVID-19. It has wrecked the global economy, and most sectors in the Philippines had not been spared. And given the economic benefits generated by the BPO sector, we are naturally curious and concerned about this sector's well-being, as are policymakers, economic managers, and the general public. That concern, of course, carries forward as we, along with the rest of the Philippines and the world, navigate our way toward a recovery and adapt to a new normal. Even though we have all heard and mentioned that phrase, many of us continue to struggle with the concept. As we see it, for example, COVID-19 is unlikely to end soon. And we said in our previous editorials that we need to carry on despite the lingering coronavirus. The question for the day is, how is the BPO sector adapting to the times? What is the outlook for the rest of the year, as well as for 2022 and beyond? These are just some of the preliminary questions that we and others attending here today might have. And I'm certain all of you are eager to hear an answer. So let us start the program. Before we do, allow me to thank our partners. Thank you to our special partners, B Hotel Alabang, B Hotel Quezon City, the Bellevue Manila, HP, and TELUS International. Thank you also to our organizational partners, the British Chamber of Commerce, the French Chamber of Commerce, the Italian Chamber of Commerce, the Cebu Chamber of Commerce, the Davao City Chamber of Commerce, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, the Management Association of the Philippines, and the Manila Times TV. And of course, thank you everyone for attending this event today. I hope that we are here for a productive meeting. Let me now segue and introduce our keynote speaker this morning. Currently serving as the Department of Labor and Employment Secretary under President Rodrigo Duterte, Attorney Silvestre Bello III has served in various capacities under 3 presidents. He was Justice Secretary during Cory Aquino's term, Solicitor General during Fidel Ramos's time, and led the government panel in talking peace with the Communist Party of the Philippines, National Democratic Front, New People's Army, or CPP, and DF-NPA, under Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's term. He obtained his Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from the Manila L. Quezon University in 1961, and took his Bachelor of Laws and graduated with distinction from the Ateneo de Manila University in 1970. He held top positions in the Philippine National Oil Company Development and Management Corporation as President and Chief Executive Officer, General Manager and CEO of the Philippine Reclamation Authority, Presidential Advisor for the New Government Center, Cabinet Oversight Officer for Indigenous Peoples and the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples Matters, Cabinet Officer for Regional Development for Region 2, Cabinet Secretary, and 1 BAP party list representative in the 16th Congress. He also sat on the board of conglomerates and large corporations such as San Miguel Corporation, Camp John Hay Development Corporation, Urban Bank, Baguio Country Club, CAP Realty Incorporated, College Assurance Plan, Red Eagle Lending Investors Corp, Porto Azul, Philippine Plaza Hotel, and Ambassador Hotel, among others, as well as part of the Philippine Airlines Board of Advisors. As a law practitioner, Secretary Bello is a distinguished associate of various law offices, namely Yulo and Bello, Yulo Torres and Bello, Yulo Kisuming Torres Ali and Bello, Yulo Torres Tariela and Bello, Tanwato Olieta and Factoran Pinlac Feliciano Partiza Moica and Bello, and C. Alcantara and Sons. In June, he became the first Filipino elected chairman of the International Labor Organization, or ILO, representing both the powerful and small governments of the world after more than a century. With that, good morning, Secretary Bello.
Good morning, President and CEO of Manila Times, Mr. Dante. Well, bakit the second? It should be. Kasi sa amin na Dante, sa amin, my father is Silvestre Sr.
Opo.
My older brother is Silvestre Jr.
Junior.
Now I am the third. So I presume you are the junior, Dante, no?
Yes, Secretary. Maarte lang po yung tatay ko yata eh.
and then my younger brother is Silvestre the fourth. And I've another, the youngest brother is Silvestre the fifth. And the son of Junior is Silvestre the sixth. When I had 3 sons, I did not name them anymore and they're Silvestre because in the order of their inheritance, malayo na sila. Well, thank you so much for the very kind and very comprehensive introduction, President Dante. And I would like to greet Ms. Blanca Mercado, the Chief Operating Officer of the Manila Times, our partners in the Business Process Outsourcing industry, stakeholders and employees and officers of Manila Times. Magandang umaga po. Pasensya na po kayo. I am on my way to my eye specialist. So that you will wonder how baka hindi makapokus yung mukha ko sa inyo. What is important is that they can see Mr. President Dante, and you can see me, kahit man lang sana sa isang portion of my face. Anyway, my dear friends, magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Since its inception, you all know that Manila Times covered and reported historical milestones, including the difficult times that we now live in as we grapple with the onslaught of this pandemic called COVID-19. Aside from its outstanding role as chronicler of history, the Manila Times is also an ally of the Department of Labor and Employment in promoting decent jobs for Filipinos through its online forum called Resiliency and Adaptability at all times of the BPO industry, the bedrock of Philippine employment through the years. We in the Department of Labor wish to express our profound gratefulness to the Manila Times in partnering with us in our mission, and we wish to convey our thanks for inviting us to a part of this forum. By the way, Dante, alam mo yung Manila Times, siguro many have not experienced this, but there was a time when there was only Manila Times. There were no other papers until dumating yung chronicler, pero it was not that widely read, hindi kagaya ng Manila Times. So Manila Times still lingers as the only national daily worthy of the the national effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which tripled throughout the global and domestic economy that is still felt until today. Financial losses due to abrupt shutdown of businesses, as well as the untimely displacement of workers, were some of the major concerns, not only last year, but even until the present. The strict quarantine protocols, you'll be surprised, implemented through the nation to allegedly mitigate the spread of the virus, albeit it's necessary, has caused very great economic disruptions with unrestrained urban mobility. Notwithstanding these present challenges, however, the BPO industry continues to serve as one of the foremost economic drivers of our country, contributing a total of $26 billion, $700 million in revenues, which is almost 1.5% growth in 2020 versus the figure of 2019. To sustain business operations amid the current health crisis, BPO companies also hired 23,000 new full-time employees in 2020 under applicable flexible work arrangement. And considering the pandemic, this is a rather remarkable increase of 1.8% compared to 2019, bringing the total industry employment to 1,320,000 employees. So 1,320,000 jobs. As the PPO industry soldiers on against the overwhelming odds, the department has provided ardent support in addressing business continuity. We did this through the inclusion of the private sector's workers in the COVID-19 vaccination programs under the A4 priority group as a frontline personnel. The department also issued a department order to encourage compliance with the telecommuting arrangement for our affected employees. We all know that various adjustments have been made in order to accommodate the changing landscape of the job market. Work from home arrangement, virtual recruitment and employment facilitation, online trainings are the new normal to support the country's labor force. While we move forward through hopefully better times, the BPO industry would rely on our department to strive to fulfill its undertaking to promote the welfare of our country's human resources. My dear friends from BPO, from Manila Times, especially President Dante, I wish to thank and congratulate Manila Times in its worthy endeavor. This virtual forum would certainly uplift the lives of many Filipinos and help them in gaining employment opportunities. Sa inyo pong lahat, maraming salamat at mabuhay po kayo.
Thank you very much, Secretary Bello. Sir, do you mind if we ask a couple of questions? Untal, you're still en route to your doctor's appointment. Pwede po ba magtanong?
Okay po, okay po.
Sige po, two questions lang. Ben, my fellow editorial writer is also here. He'd like to ask the first question and then I'll ask another question po.
Okay, Ben.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you for taking time out. And you're obviously a little tied up this morning. I understand that as I've just done that myself. I have a bit of a sticky question for you. I hope you don't mind. And this is just something that came up yesterday, is that there was an article in, I believe it was yesterday's Washington Post, that was actually quite critical of not the Department of Labor, but the BPO industry here. The basis for the article was a story about a call center agent here in the Philippines who perished from COVID-19, and the thesis of the article was that the industry here is not providing enough support for its employees when they become ill. What is the DOLE working on with the BPO industry to kind of ensure that there is some protection for, beyond the safety measures that are employed in the working spaces? What are you working on that there's some protection, some health coverage, and some support for people who have to deal with this? It's actually a question that's personally relevant to me because I have a 24-year-old stepson who's a call center agent. He is recovering from COVID-19 right now. He's okay, fortunately, but it does affect people. They need to keep working, but allowing them to work puts them at greater risk. So what can you do with the industry to help protect people a little better?
Thank you, Ben. And the question is coupled with the concern about how our BPO workers could be protected. Well, initially, Ben, we came up with a labor advisory. And this labor advisory, to my mind, is a very, very effective way of protecting our workers in the BPO. And that is the first, you must have heard about the telecommuting law. Okay, and then this is coupled with our advisory, encouraging both our employees and our employers, especially in the BPO, to resort to what we call as the flexible arrangement as well as work from home arrangement. To our mind, Ben, I think this is the best that we could do to protect our BPO workers. Well, this is in addition to all these health protocols that is being imposed by IATF, the use of face masks, the use of face shield, disinfectant in the workplace and everything. But to my mind, to me, the work from home arrangement and the flexible working arrangement would be more protective of our BPO workers.
Okay, thank you for that. Clint, you want to add
Thank you,
something?
Thank you, Secretary. One last question before we let you go, if you don't mind, sir. Maybe if you can update us on the department's policies on the MECQ, GCQ. We've heard from the private sector that they prefer these granular lockdowns, and we saw lately that there's an improvement in the unemployment rate. And I think you could probably attribute that to the time when the economy was opening up already. And then we had to go back to MECQ again because of the Delta. But moving forward, sir, what are some of the arguments that you have been pushing with regard to employment, the general employment?
Well, thank you, Dante. No, in the IATF meetings, there is always what we call the group. We are the economic groups. I'm
Yes, sir.
referring to Secretary Carl Chua of NEDA, and then my partner in the Department of Trade and Industry, and then Department of Labor, always advocating the easing of quarantine protocols. Because it's a choice between dying of COVID and dying of hunger. And that is the reality that we have to face. And we have been advocating that we loosen the protocols. However, lately, it seems that we are now, well, before we were talking to deaf ears, I think they're slightly opening their ears to what we are advocating. And hopefully within the next few days, there will be substantial change in the protocols and the quarantine protocols. I'm not at liberty yet to review.
Right.
But I think we are meeting on Monday for that purpose.
Oh, well,
But ang
sir,
importante dito, na-realize nila na talagang we do not only talk of the effects of COVID in terms of health, but we have to talk of COVID in terms of its effect on the employment situation of our country. And I think they already realized na ang ating mga workers are the prime movers of our economy.
Right,
Walang
right.
workers, walang negosyo. Walang
Right.
negosyo, walang economy. Yan ang
Right.
kanilang i-address. Hopefully, there will be some major changes in position or in policies this coming Monday.
Sir, I hope they listen to you, and we look forward to Monday's announcement. Baka po meron kayong final words or gustong i-share sa mga sumusunod sa atin ngayon about the Department of Labor?
Well,
Any final
una,
words?
we have to thank BPO. You have to really thank BPO for increasing our employment rate. If not for BPO, sigurado bagsak ang ating employment rate. And so thanks to BPO. And then, of course, thank you to Manila Times for continuing to inform our citizenry, especially about what COVID is all about, its effects, and how to avoid it. So thank you so much, Dante, and good luck to Manila Times, good luck to the BPO industry.
Thank you, Secretary. My father sends his regards, by the way, and good luck on your eye exam. I hope everything is well, and will let us know if we can do anything else or announce anything else from the Department of Labor. Maraming salamat po, Secretary.
Thank you po, thank you po. I have to leave now, sir. Thank you, thank you.
Okay,
Ben, thank
salamat
you very
po.
much.
Ben, I think we can introduce our next speaker for today.
Yes, let's get in. But before I do, I would like to make a special acknowledgement to the Bellevue in Manila and the B hotels in Alabang and Quezon City for providing our snacks and lunch today. They have a neat menu of takeout foods, which of course is kind of the way we're all doing it these days. So thank you very much for that. Look forward to getting that as soon as I have my hands free. Our next speaker is Ms. Zoe Diaz de Rivera, who is the lead for talent attraction and academic linkages of the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines. She is responsible for the implementation of talent attraction initiatives of the IBPAP, which includes industry awareness programs and industry academic linkages to support the continuing growth and overall competitiveness of the Philippine IT BPM sector. In line with her role in IBPAP is being the chairperson of the Special Committee on Academe Industry Linkages of the Regional Development Council of the Calabarzon Region 4A. Would you please welcome Ms. Rivera?
Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. I'd like to say special thanks to DOLE, to the leadership of Secretary Silvestre Bello for the support he has been giving the industry, and of course, to Mr. Dante Kling Ang and the whole the Manila Times team, for giving us a venue to increase awareness of the resilience of the IT BPM industry. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I do want to acknowledge that we have people from Bukidnon, from Bulacan. Hi to everybody out there, and good to see you. And we hope that you get to know more about the industry. So, as mentioned by Secretary Bello, the industry has been resilient despite everything that has been happening this nearly 2 years of ours in this situation that we're in. But with this, I'd like to give you an overview of what the IT BPM industry in the Philippines is all about. So let us start off with actually what is IT BPM? Okay, so definitely it's IT, anything related with IT with the business process management. So the IT BPM companies manage aspects of work and different operations of an organization, whether foreign, local, or multinational, as a third-party outsourcing provider, or offshoring, to delivery locations. And in this industry, we do animation, contact center, which is the most prevalent that most everybody knows, so even Ben mentioned that he has somebody who is working in a contact center, game development, which already is a very, is a growing area. And then we have the global in-house centers or the shared services, healthcare, because, it's been growing even before this, this situation with us. We've been helping different countries in their health, providing better health care to their constituents. And then, of course, the bedrock of this all is the IT and software services, So if you are in IT software, you're the in guy right now. And, not only the IT BPM industry, but also other industries are, looking forward to seeing you. So where did all this all start? It all started, when the internet came online. That was in the 1980s. Some of you might not have been born yet during this time. All right. So we did have a small sector there, mostly the pioneers, which were, like Under Consulting, things like that. So more of the consulting things that they did. And then before the Y2K, if you don't know what the Y2K means, it's when we transitioned into the year 2000. Then we had to reprogram, a lot of the current programs that were on by the different companies. That's why we had multinational corporations hiring Filipinos or Filipino companies, are coming over to the Philippines to start business here so that they could service that. When they realized that there was great talent, from the Philippines who could easily communicate with the global workforce because our proficiency or English being our second language, and our affinity in culturally with the different nations around the world, especially America and Europe, then the contact center came in. Okay. And there was a sudden growth, suddenly we had over 100 full-time employees in the industry. That's the time wherein, Ortigas was starting to grow and the night lights were starting. It was people were out not just for the nightlife, but more for work, And then, with this, providers from other countries who were serving the IT BPM industry globally decided, hey, I should position myself in the Philippines, invest there because of great talent we have, and that's when there was a boom in the contact center. There were lots of trainings and stuff, and people were hiring a lot for, to receive calls. And if you notice at that time, it was just simple tasks that they did, directory assistance and the like, which we don't have anymore because things have picked up a lot right now, and we are doing more high value tasks. Okay, so we doubled in number at that time, and then came in the large multinational companies, so the shared services grew, and then again, we doubled again in number, and then in 2010, right now we are at 1.3, as Secretary Bello mentioned, million full-time employees in the industry. And we're so very thankful for the vast talent that the Philippines does have, and we hope that they continue to grow and improve their talent. So with this, okay, definitely IBPAP, grew as an association because now we had the 6 subsectors who are, or member associations who are part of us: the Philippine Software Industry Association, Animation Council of the Philippines, Contact Center Association of the Philippines, the Health Information Management Association of the Philippines, the Game Development Association of the Philippines, and of course, the Global In-House Center Council of the Philippines. And you can definitely go to the IBPAP website to check all these associations and see what jobs or opportunities are available in the industry. So the IT BPM industry has various career opportunities for everybody. I'm assuming probably, you can tell me on the Facebook chat if you are looking for employment, if you're a student, or if you're a businessman just looking for opportunities and, how to be able to be gainfully employed or increase your employability, So there are different opportunities in the IT BPM industry. Definitely, we want, as an industry, we want to keep our strength, which is the voice services, since we're number 1 there. We want to continue to provide Fortune 100 firms with the services they need from the Philippines. Because with the 1.3 million direct hires, 1/3 of this is actually in the countryside, or sorry, nearly 1/3 of this is actually in the countryside. So the growth is not only in the Metro Manila area or in the big cities, but they're also in the countryside. So there's been growth in Iloilo, Davao, Cebu, Bacolod, different areas of the Philippines have grown vastly because of the ITBPM Center. And we look forward to bringing greater growth to these areas, hopefully, 452,000 by next year, with the help of DOLE, Manila Times, and all, our supporters. We can do this, especially with you, So how do you get into the industry? Definitely communication skills. When I say communication skills, it's not about just speaking in English. It can be other languages because we do hire for different languages also. It's about empathy, the ability to serve others, which is a very strong Filipino trait, definitely empathy, because when you're like now, what we're doing, we're conversing on the internet, on Zoom, on Facebook Live. So you have to show that empathy in your voice, despite that you're not able to see the person, And then definitely we have a very strong cultural affinity with the different clients that we do serve abroad. like the US, Europe, Australia, and others. Okay, so our strength definitely is beyond voice. If you will see here, different skills coming up, different areas for animation, contact center. What I want you to do is, if you have time, just put on the chat, which of this would you like to be part of? Would you want to be a 3D animator, or would you want to continue on as an auditor because you're an accountant, or are you part of the healthcare, so you can be part of the patient care, clinical trial management, or do medical transcription or medical coding. There are a lot of opportunities, even if you're from different programs or you graduated from different courses, So just chat here. Let me see, did we see anybody here, who chatted something about the courses that they want, but definitely you can find the different opportunities here. For 2019 to 2021, based on, discussions with our members association and some desk research that we did, these are the areas or the top priority skills that are needed for today, right now. So if you're thinking of how should I upskill myself, how should I improve my skills, because you can go online, and get all the courses available. Here are some of the areas you can look into, data visualization, machine learning, the contact center needs a lot of that. For animation, you have 2D digital animation. You have team leaders, Six Sigma, definitely one of the key things right now. Okay, data analytics, So for IT, you have software applications development, Java, .NET. I'm not an expert here with the IT portion, but they did list this out, and this is good information for you to have if you're thinking of upskilling. If you are already part of the industry, these are areas that you can upskill yourself to be ready and make yourself relevant even into the future. And that's what we're hoping that, so that the industry will continue to grow and that we can provide higher services for our clients out there. Now, so in IBPAP, we do have the talent development team, which I'm part of, and we do have a talent development framework. So what are we looking here? We're looking at domain skills, digital skills, leadership skills. And why are we looking at this? Because we hope, that those in the IT BPM industry will become lifelong learners, and we can help to upskill more Filipinos, to be ready for the future. Because definitely, despite the pandemic, even prior to the pandemic, we have been telling people you have to upskill yourself because of, the, 4IR that's happening. Everything's getting digital. So what are the domain skills? These domain skills are subsector defined, specialized skills based on each subsector, as the list I gave you earlier. Definitely digital skills. Digital skills cut across. Today, everybody has to learn something digital. We're so much on the social media, but now we have to be able to learn all the various tools available to us as we do our work. And definitely leadership. With 1.3, full-time employees, there is a lot of room for leadership here. Can you just imagine a team of, a special group of 1,000 people? How many of those are managers, subject matter experts, and they have to be great leaders within the industry. And we're thankful, really, for the different leaders that we have within the industry from the very beginning that have helped grow the industry to what it is today. And as mentioned of Secretary Bello, it's being resilient. It's there. We're still hiring. And we hope that we'll continue to do so. So with the help of the ICT and Lichu Properties, what we did, we have launched the Digital Cities 2025, because the aim here is to bring the growth not only in metro areas, but also outside Metro Manila and in the provinces, so that we are more inclusive, to be able to unlock these opportunities. the opportunities here are not only for the big companies, but even for small companies, because they can service them, individually. There are big companies out there, there are small companies looking for people who can help them online and grow their companies from all over. Because we have the talent here, we can do this. So these are just some of the cities that are mentioned that are part of the growth areas that we currently are looking into. How did we choose them? We looked at their talent development opportunities there. We looked at their infrastructure. And when we go out, we say these are the areas where some of them already have IT BPM companies. Some are still gearing towards that, but they're improving themselves so that they can be part of the IT growth area of the IT BPM industry. For the talent out there, what you need to do is really to improve your skills and be ready. Just go and try to get there somehow. So when we did the Digital Cities journey, okay, so we looked at international development, talent attraction development, infrastructure development, and marketing and promotion. So we are promoting the Philippines as the ITB PM destination all over the world. But we cannot do that, or we can only do that with your help, everyone's help out there. So we are very thankful for this opportunity to reach out to everyone regarding this. And we're doing this virtually. Okay. So how do you join the industry? How do you be part of it? How can you apply? One is you can start off by going to itstartshere.ph. You look at the different, there is a career map there, and you can look at the different areas wherein you would like to apply. And then you can definitely, learn more about the IT BPM 3 industry through that. And then you can also go to our talent hub at IBPAP, website, and look at the different things that you can do there. We have IT BPM school. We have the industry awareness fair videos there. These are all available here. The links are there so that you can easily reach out to us. In the IBPAP website, as the links also to our members, and most of them are doing their application via the internet, doing interviews via Zoom, via Teams, whatever format. Yeah. So one of the skills you have to learn is to go through an interview online. How do you face the camera? How do you smile? How do you answer questions? Things like that. Because initial part of the interview is definitely online. There are portions that will definitely have to be in the office, but as mentioned, the protocols are definitely followed, whatever they may be. So with that, I'd like you to be part of the growth and start an IT BPM career. Thank you very much, everyone. Back to you, Beth.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have a couple of questions for you that I think we're going to get to after our next speaker. Who is Mr. Ella Delario, I hope they pronounced that right, who is a senior officer at the Institute of Labor Studies, or the ILS, which is a research agency attached to the Department of Labor and Employment. He undertakes research, writing, and advocacy works on a variety of topics concerning labor migration, gender rights, welfare, and social protection. Recently, he has improved his portfolio to focus on mental health, particularly among workers disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which of course is very timely. Since late 2019, he has been spearheading the development of the workplace's own mental health policy and program, although there are some challenges to that. Meanwhile, he has also served as the Gender and Development, or GAD, focal person of the Institute from 2016 to 2018, leading several pioneering projects and activities. Beyond ILS, Mr. Delario continues to be involved in civic and volunteer engagement in the areas of youth leadership, IP education, and ecological sustainability. Would you please welcome Mr. Delario?
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. And also thank you to President and CEO, Mr. Dante Ang II. And of course to Manila Times for inviting the Institute for Labor Studies to this very important forum. In fact, this is not only important, but we think that this is also timely as the world is actually marking the World Suicide Prevention Day today. And how we wish that this day would help stop the world and also make the people focus on this very important topic, which is mental health, and join us in this kind of forum. So if I may just share my screen. So much of the discussion that I'll be giving is based on our research paper done at the Institute in 2020, which was titled Between Resilience and Transformation. What lies between resilience and transformation, we will figure out in a couple of minutes later. But at this moment, okay. But this time, let me just take you all back to that time in March 2020 when, the first, I think, ECQ was imposed, not only in Metro Manila, but also over entire Luzon. This was taken in Commonwealth Avenue, and I think everyone was really caught flat-footed that time. And many observers would describe, COVID-19 as a crisis like no other, precisely because, from a basic public health crisis, it suddenly and quickly turned into an economic, social, and even political crisis. But along this kind of global public health emergency that is mostly physical, in a sense, there's also this kind of crisis that has been happening. And it was no less than the World Health Organization who rang the alarm to governments that time that they also had to look into the mental health and psychosocial considerations during the COVID-19 outbreak. And some observers defined, this kind of problem during that time and until now as a silent crisis, precisely because many of our mental health concerns are invisible unless we talk it out loud and share it with other people. There were also other observers who tag this kind of mental health crisis as a parallel pandemic, that while there has been a concern to mitigate the COVID-19 outbreak, there is also this kind of very important health issue that is happening while the pandemic is raging on. But others would like to say that this can be the next pandemic. So given this, we've seen how COVID-19, as a public health and as a mental health crisis, has resurfaced this concept of resilience. And I think many of us here, you can also share in the chat box or chat on Facebook. If you have, experienced this personally, doing the plantitas that time, collecting plants, or even just doing regular exercises or other coping mechanisms that you did while we were at our homes, isolated from the general public during the longest lockdown in the world. And but many of these kind of coping mechanisms or resilience has or rather have actually been viewed as rather personal or individualized. While we can say that this is somehow transformational in a sense that, in the midst of a suffering or perhaps loneliness, you can still do something. This is an act of resistance in the face of adversities. I think that there's really just so much that resilience can do if in the traditional sense, having personal ways of coping with the crisis. We think that the real transformation is beyond individual. And while many of us have found ourselves enjoying our time at home, many are not really like us. And some would really wanted some kind of professional help. Like this one in this graph, you can see how the COVID-19 crisis has affected or has led to the uptick or the spike in calls over NCMH crisis hotline, the 24/7, beginning in March 2020 when the first lockdown was imposed on the country. And it continued to increase over the next months until, I think, in the graph, until July 2020, before going down in August 2020, the same year. And when I was trying to figure out what could be maybe the reason why there was a sudden decrease also in the calls, aside from the fact that, you know, this was recorded at the middle of the month in August 2020, I realized that it was also the time that, you know, the country transitioned to GCQ or from ECQ and MECQ. And maybe we can also somehow attribute that kind of, you know, policy shifts in the way that we experience mental health individually and also as a community and nationally. So given the tremendous challenge between or the tremendous challenge that COVID-19 is giving us in terms of how we deal with our mental health personally and also as a country, what lies? Our question is what lies between resilience and transformation. And part of what we did was precisely the research in 2020, where we tried to assess how these two important documents or important issuances were implemented during the course of the pandemic. The first one is about Republic Act 11036 or the Philippine Mental Health Act of 2018. So it was only 2 years in effect when the COVID-19 pandemic happened. Also during that year, I think in January 2020, the Department of Labor and Employment issued Department Order number 208-20 or the guidelines for the implementation of mental health workplace policies and programs for the private sector. More specifically, we wanted to know these things. The first one is, how did our IT BPO companies progress in terms of institutionalizing their policies, the programs and services, and financing for mental health, especially given the fact that there have been two major issuances already from our government. Second one, in doing so, in institutionalizing their mental health policies, what have been the challenges and issues that they have faced, especially given the restrictions and the difficulties brought about by the pandemic. And lastly, we also look into some critical opportunities towards strengthening the Philippine mental health system, given the fact that, you know, there's only so much that can be done. Personally, also organizationally, some things have to be done at the national level. And just a quick view of the demographics or the profile of our respondents. We were able to, between September to October 2020, we were able to reach out to 78 survey respondents representing 78 IT BPO companies across the country. Over 50% came from Metro Manila, while others came from Cebu, CDO, and Davao. We also asked them if their gender, and 40% identified as a woman. In terms of subsectors that were shared by Zoe earlier, half came from call or contact centers subsector, while there were also respondents coming from the software and computer-related subsector. In terms of the size, 2/3 come from, you know, the biggest IT BPO companies with over 200 plus employees, and 25% of them are employing 80 to 90% regular or full-time employees. And for some findings, first off, in terms of mental health policy institutionalization, we asked them if they have indeed establish certain mental health policy in their workplaces. And is what we found, 2 in 5 or around 40% have mental health policy that is distinct and separate from the other policies in the workplace. RA 11036 particularly mandated the enactment of a certain policy in workplaces, both public and private. And I think that this is still far from that vision of having every workplace implementing a certain mental health policy. Aside from this, we found out that 1 in 4 of the IT BPO companies have mental health programs, but don't have any kind of formal policy. And aside from this, 1 in 5 or 20% of the companies have mental health. They said being incorporated in their general policy, but not explicitly stated, meaning to say that they may have used other terms like well-being or mental wellness, but not exactly as mental health per se. And to us, this is quite problematic on 2 grounds. First one, if there are a lot of programs and services being done, but without a certain clear and formal policy, I think many programs and services would not really have that kind of impact towards a single goal or towards a single objective. So it's important to really establish a clear-cut policy on mental health. The other one is, imagine if an employee has a problem or has a conflict with the management, and there comes a time when he or she experiences a mental health problem, things like what we call reasonable accommodation, an example of which is giving lighter workload for the employee. This will be difficult to negotiate if that employee is having a problem or conflict with the management, unless there is a clear-cut policy that says that programs and services have to be applied indiscriminately for the entire workforce. In terms of mental health programs and services, so we asked them to choose from a pre-identified list of sample mental health programs and services, also called from literature and or adapted also to the context of the Philippines. And there were 3 categories there. The first one is about prevention or risk reduction. The second one is about treatment and management stage, including return and reintegration into the workplace. And lastly is about promotion or overall advocacy. And what we found out was most companies have a lot of programs and services under the promotion and advocacy, particularly those pertaining to providing monetary incentives or conducting awareness orientation. Lagging behind a bit are those under the prevention or risk reduction areas and treatment and management. And when we try to investigate this during the focus group discussions that we conducted after the survey, there were 3 factors that were resonating among the participants in the FGD. The first one is all about cost. We know how expensive mental health and psychosocial services are, especially in a country that still has a limited staffing for this kind of specialized interventions. You might be wondering why, despite cost, there are monetary incentives still figured prominently among the respondents. And what we found out was this is perhaps due to the fact that this kind of incentives were already in place even before the Mental Health Act was promulgated into law. We know how private sector also tries to incentivize our employees through financial and other financial rewards in our workplaces. The second one would be about capacity. While certain services or certain interventions can be done by practically anyone with a bit of awareness or a bit of orientation of mental health, some kinds of interventions are really specialized, and even our HR units have to undergo certain trainings in order to be capacitated and in order to really have to be effective in terms of providing those kinds of mental health services. But last but not the least is, of course, leadership. Our participants mentioned a lot about buy-in, not only from their principals in local BPO companies here, but also from their principals abroad. Most especially those that for services that require a lot of budget, for instance. For example, in treatment and management area, we found out that only half cited the provision of reasonable accommodations. Now, what I mentioned as some mechanisms in order for our employees to fare a bit well with their work, in our companies. Less than half have specialized and reintegrative care services, like access to therapy sessions. Despite this, we found out that over 2/3 have actually, along the themes of this forum, adapted to the new normal of a digitalized delivery of programs and services. So before pandemic, when companies have employees who need mental health care, they have to go, in person to their therapies. Now we have, for instance, teletherapy. So I think this is quite obvious in a sector that, has also easily adjusted to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We note that in the initial phase of the pandemic, I think IT BPO is one, or perhaps one of the few industries that didn't stop, their operations and move forward with, providing services, which we are really thankful for, personally also. Now, given an appreciation, that mental health is really really has multiple, even intersectional dimensions. There are a lot of things or factors that impact on a person's mental health. We also ask our respondents what other kinds of policies they have that they thought would help their employees in terms of taking care of their mental health. And two areas that we found to be most prominent are about non-discrimination and equal opportunity. For instance, there were about 91% of our respondents who said that they have these kinds of policies in terms of recruitment. And the other area is about safe and secure space. That kind of psychological safety or sense of being safe in your workplace, whatever you do or you say to your colleagues or to your management. And here we found, let's say, for example, 90% of respondents having zero tolerance on violence against women as a sort of policy. And around half of them also cited policies on confidentiality for people living with HIV and also having open door policies. In terms of financing, we found that 1 in 4 of our companies fully pay, fortunately, for the programs and services that they have established for their employees in their workplaces. However, more than half pay through private HMOs, but mostly exclude medication needs. I think this is also quite known to many of us that still a lot of private HMOs don't cover mental health services to date. And of these, around 40% of the companies indicated employees needed to shell out from their own pockets. So meaning to say that while some of them are taken care of by their employers, around 40%, there were instances that employees have to pay for certain services that were availed, let's say, in a certain facility. Now, down to my last few slides, we also asked our respondents about structural challenges in terms of mental health. We recognize the fact that they have policies, they have programs and services, but still there are bigger and perhaps most powerful forces at play here that we can only do so much for. So we ask them, going beyond your workplaces, what do you think would affect you in terms of implementing your policies and programs? And 2 in 3 of the companies cited high cost of services, and we have already discussed that earlier. 2 in 5 cited exclusion of several services from private HMOs, as already mentioned earlier. But here, lastly, 1 in 3 cited stigma and fear of being discriminated against. So you see, these factors are, in a nutshell, also correspond to economic and social factors that still hinder an effective and efficient implementation of mental health programs and policies in the workplace. Nonetheless, to a lesser extent, it's also noteworthy to highlight that there were some of them who identified the lack of government investments as something that would hugely impact on their implementation of workplace-based and community-driven efforts for mental health. And this is a bit relevant, especially right now when our government is crafting their post-pandemic recovery plan, and also Congress is deliberating on the budget and how we wish that mental health and public health would be given a bit more priority, especially that we are still far from a pandemic-free future. And the next slides, I'll be discussing what can be possibly done given these kinds of challenges in the workplace and also at the national level. And I understand that many of our viewers here are from IT BPO companies. So let me share some of the recommendations that we wrote in the paper. The first one is definitely about institutionalizing mental health by having a separate and distinct policy. In terms of building a house, you cannot really build a house without a solid foundation. So it's important that we have that kind of foundational policy that will guide what we want to do in our workplaces. But an important thing in the process is conducting mental health and psychosocial services needs assessment. Some kind of, check-in with your employees. What do they really want or what do they really need? For us to really have some relevant and responsive kinds of programs and policies. You can also try to expand and diversify what you already have and focus on those areas that were found as not so quite prominent in terms of having been implemented during the past year. So these are on the prevention and on the treatment. You can also explore negotiations with health insurance providers for the inclusion of MH services or benefits, even on a gradual and limited basis. We heard anecdotes of certain IPBPO companies with, I think, mental health counselors also, or some kind of experts that they regularly have covered in their health insurance provider. So some companies can also explore that. You can also aim for full coverage of employees in any MH program or service, regardless of employment status, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, and other basic identities. You also can strive to raise awareness of mental health through advocacy activities and informative communication materials, including for management. Also, this corresponds to the findings that leadership matters in terms of really having a effective mental health policy and program. Part of this is to capacitate at least your unit heads and HR managers with MH knowledge and skills. Not only those that are basic, but perhaps you can explore a more advanced training on peer counseling, for instance. Lastly, you can establish or allot a progressive mental health fund as investments for both employees, welfare, and company productivity. We say that happy employees are productive employees, and we always take pride in our talent pool. That's why we are we have been one of the top destinations for BPO investments. But when you have really a sad, a depressed or anxious talent pool, you cannot really expect them to really be their best for their company. So I think investments are really worthwhile in this regard. Now, lastly, we also gave some recommendations for our own department, and that is to provide needs-based technical assistance to IT BPO companies. We presented this to IBPAP, and there were also clamors that in the same way that they were guided and supported in formulating their policies for OSH or for HIV, for tuberculosis and other communicable diseases, there's also a need for DOLE to also provide this kind of intervention, especially that this is quite also technical to be handled alone by our companies. And lastly, overall for the Philippine government, there is really a need to boost investments in mental health and public health as a whole and leverage this kind of intervention right now when we are still crafting pandemic recovery plans, not only for this year, but also in the coming years. We can also strengthen further the universal healthcare program by exploring expanded or subsidized coverage of MH services and introduce mandatory coverage of at least early treatment. So we note of, let's say, PhilHealth expanding certain mental health services, but I think this is still limited to consultation prior to, a series of therapy sessions, which would rather be charged to the mental health, a mental health service user. Lastly, we note of certain non-government organizations providing mental health programs. I think it will really be helpful if we come up with an incentives mechanism for them to scale up their interventions. And that sums up my sharing of our paper last 2020. Thank you again to Manila Times, and over to you, Ben and Mr. Ang.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think now we're going to have some question and answer sessions. Frank, do you have anything in mind? I certainly have a couple of questions for both our speakers. I appreciate both of you taking time out to share with us today, but I'll let you go first since I went first last time, if you have on your mind.
Yeah, you know me, I always have questions. First of all, thank you, Ms. Zoe, Mr. Ella, for participating in this forum today. My first question, actually two questions, go to Ms. De Rivera. First, before the pandemic, there was some concern about automation and artificial intelligence possibly posing a threat to the growth of the outsourcing sector. I was hoping that you could update on that, but I'm happy that you mentioned that the outsourcing sector is also diversified. So perhaps that is the antidote there. The follow-up question to Mr. Rivera is on talent development. There has been a lot of talk these days about the quality of education in the Philippines. The Department of Education is pivoting to quality over access. And I understand that even before the pandemic, the sector, continually struggled with finding competent workers, not only in English, but I think even more so in the other foreign languages that the Philippines is currently serving. So may we start there, Ms. Zoe, and I have some follow-up questions also to Mr. Diller.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much, Clint, for those questions. So with regards to the fourth IR, yes, there were concerns about that. That was part of our roadmap. That's why we have talent development programs for those who are already in the industry, and we are working closely with government to help, inform them about the skills that we need in the industry and, how to grow this. Of course, we do have awareness fairs where we tell the individuals themselves that, hey, like, this opportunity you gave us today, now it's out there telling the people who are in this audience or who will be watching it later on that these are the skills needed. Please check it out. A lot of those skills can be taken online. They're free, or they can be taken as part of your curriculum themselves. Definitely, the competition is not only in the Philippines, among subsectors or among different industries. We are competing for the same number of talents. Okay. And then now that everything is online and our talent can actually apply all over the world, then the competition for talent is a global thing. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be competitive as an individual, then you have to upskill, keep yourself abreast with what is the latest in your field. It's definitely, you're nearly like a doctor who keeps going on training all the time. That's the way things are right now, and we just have to keep up with it. And I hope that the talent out there will continue to do so, with these things that are happening, whether it was the fourth IR or what's happening with COVID right now. Each individual talent should take care of their own individual growth, their own individual improvements, so that as a nation, we can compete with other nations out there in the IT/BPM field. So basically, that's,
Are there certain, specific policies or laws that IBPAP is trying to lobby for or trying to ask government to adopt so as to ensure the long-term sustainability of the industry? Maybe what are some of those policies that you're recommending or laws that you're lobbying for? Because that's the purpose of this forum, right? So to bring out these concerns, right, to the attention of the general public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So we do work definitely when the CHED was coming up with K-12 proposals and all that. They, reached out to us about it, and we gave our responses to that. Things like that, even DepEd. So we are there. We have people who are part of the legislative things that they do. So we're looking into those things. We do work closely with DOLE, with the different agencies as they develop these policies. When we have problems, we bring it up to them, and they're very open, really, to when we reach out to them with regards to the problems or the situations that we are facing, not only during this time, but even before. I can identify specifically the current laws that we're working on, but there are things like the one on what do you call this, internship. There's some revision going through that, so they have reached out to us about it. So things like that. Continuous collaboration, definitely. The industry wouldn't have grown if there wasn't continuous collaboration with government, which we are very thankful for.
Well, please share us some position papers if you if you don't mind the public knowing more about it. But we're open to that, right? Mr. Delario, you talked about a very interesting topic today. Certainly one that Manila Times can relate to, because I just had a couple of staff members who had to beg off for an extended period because of mental health concerns. But my question is there such a thing as prevention in mental health? I mean, is there some things that people can do to be less prone to mental health problems, just like in every other medical condition? And, maybe some regimen that will strengthen mental toughness or prepare them, I guess, for the challenges of the workplace in the new normal.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of those kinds of regimen or tips on how to cope better or how to actually take care of our mental health. Over the past year, we've heard individuals doing their collecting plans, or even simply reading books, or taking cold shower. But I think that the central message there is not everything works for everyone. So I think that you have to find that something that work for you. The things that you feel would be most effective. for you as an individual. That's at the individual level. Also in the workplace, I think that there are a lot of things that can be done to prevent these kinds of mental health concerns. Starting off, let's say, with the kind of arrangements that we have right now, especially during the pandemic. So it's really wonderful to see many companies now thinking of a future that is hybrid, for instance. We feel somehow that we cannot really go back to that kind of environment where we will endure the heavy traffic or waste time in the streets just to go to our workplaces when it can be done at home, for instance, or anywhere. Those kinds of certain arrangements at work, I think they have really huge impact on the way that we can prevent certain mental health problems of our employees.
Well, it's interesting that in Manila Times, for instance, we made a decision to allow people to work indefinitely from home, and from what we're hearing from the presentations earlier, something similar is happening not just also in the BPO sector but in the general economy. But we're finding out that working from home doesn't always work for everyone. In fact, for our company, we're having to walk back some of those policies because we recognize for just a few individuals, it's better for their mental health to be at the office at least a certain number of times a week because maybe of their personal circumstances. So is that consistent with what you are finding in your research? And then is there a need perhaps to introduce amendments to the Republic Act 11036 or even the Department Order guidelines? Because you're right. I mean, we assume that everyone would welcome working from home and not content with traffic. But for certain people, not many, maybe just a handful, it doesn't help them out. In fact, for my staff, it's actually been worse for them. So we made different arrangements just specifically for a couple of people. But what do you see?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting subject matter, and personally, I have also experienced it myself when you were trying to pay for an arrangement that allows you to work from home indefinitely, but there will come a time that you would feel that you needed to also report to work, and I think that the main issue here is that we are working from home, and this was also shared by many of the participants during our FGDs. We are not simply working from home, we are actually working from home in the midst of a pandemic. So that is totally different from the kind of concept that we have when back in the years when there were still no pandemic. People would want to have that kind of arrangement where they can work anywhere. And I think it operates now differently because we are living in a crisis that puts our health and our livelihoods at risk. So I think it's totally different right now when we talk about work from home than before when there was still no pandemic. But I think it all boils down to this kind of sense that people need to have a choice at some point, even before beyond the pandemic. If some people feel that 2 days at work or 2 days at work from home can work for them and 3 days in the office, then that would be one way of contemplating with this question of how do we move forward after the pandemic when people have become used to working from home during the pandemic.
Yeah, interesting. Ben, I have some other questions, but you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I have several questions too, but I'll try to pick out the best ones. I can vouch for what you said about the discovery that working from home is not always what it's cracked up to be. I miss the office personally. I could stand to do there for a couple of days a week, but when it's safe, maybe we'll do something different.
Be careful what you ask for, Ben. I might be listening, eh?
I realize what I just said there, but Yeah, I think the problem with, I think that, I think Mr. Delario just hit on it there. I mean, the problem from working from home under these circumstances is that it's not really optional. And that puts a whole different character on it, because we cannot really, we can't really plan out how we're going to separate our home and working time.
Spaces, time, yeah.
That's it. And I want to, I want to ask Mr. Ella a question. Me personally, my coping mechanism is plants. I have about a 12 square meter apartment, and it looks like a forest in here. But you had said that you want to the transformation has to go beyond individual, and I took that to mean that both in workplaces and in the population at large, that transformation would be a greater appreciation of the importance of mental health maintenance, removing the stigma from it, and having people accept, whether it's, dealing with the workplace in particular or just people in general, having people accept that, this is something that needs to be taken care of, and, people should not be stigmatized, for needing the help. But what I'm curious about is how do you encourage that transformation, on a broader scale? How do you encourage that public conversation and, people to understand and accept the notion?
Yeah, I think the most fundamental effort that we can take in terms of, expanding this kind of conversations is to really raise awareness and to conduct, similar forums like this that puts mental health at the center of the discussion. Very seldom that we have, conversations like this at a national scale, and sometimes when this mental health is bring up, or is being talked about nationally, it's not also in the proper way of talking about mental health. That sometimes we even do more harm than good in terms of talking about mental health. So awareness raising is very important, not only through events like this, but also through production of different kinds of communication materials, and having our government at the forefront of really talking about mental health in the right way, and giving, of course, also walking the talk in terms of providing the necessary investments that this sector needs, especially during right now that we are still seeing spikes not only in COVID cases, but also in cases of suicide or cases of those reporting diagnosis of depression and anxiety during this crisis.
Okay, well, just to follow up to that, just something you said just now, walking the talk. Within the government itself, the various government agencies, is the government actually doing that? Have there been, as far as I know, the government is still the largest employer in the country. So what is the progress within the government itself? Because if they're gonna preach that necessity, obviously they need to practice it on their own. So how is that going?
Yeah, I think we have to start from an appreciation that things are really overwhelming right now, and even the government is quite really overwhelmed with managing the COVID-19 crisis. And when you are overwhelmed, sometimes you overlook certain things like mental health that it has been historically really marginalized in terms of prioritization. So I think that's quite understandable. That's why advocates, champions, not only within the government, but also people like you who bring this to the fore, that's really an important part of really reminding our government that mental health should not be left alone in terms of prioritization in our COVID-19 response. And one way, really very concrete, is to have an established allocation in our, let's say, General Appropriations Act for mental health. Right now, it's really quite sad that we have seen certain cuts in public health funds during the worst public health emergency in recent memory, and that's quite a challenge in terms of promoting overall health of the Filipinos.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to ask a couple of questions of Ms. Rivera. You talked about the outlook for employment in the countryside, and your concentration is on talent development. I'm curious, what the market outlook for the sector is, with the obviously the assumptions from the end of 2019 have changed dramatically, and probably the assumptions from the end of 2020 have changed dramatically because this hasn't played out like everybody was hoping it would. So for example, you said you're looking at 452,000 jobs in the countryside, outside of Metro Manila, so to speak, by 2022. Is that still realistic? And what's the growth prospects? Not only the growth prospects for the industry, but how may it shift? Due to the changes that have just been imposed on the entire world in the last 18 months or so.
Yeah. So, as mentioned by Secretary Bello, despite this, based on their own studies, that the industry itself has still grown despite everything that has happened recently. And part of that is in the countryside. Definitely, the 400,000+ is a total of the whole, so there's a little bit of growth there. We do know that currently some of our members are currently hiring in Davao and Cebu, Iloilo. If you will go to their websites or their Facebook pages, then you will see that they're posting about the different openings that they have, and you can go to, let's say, the different job portals, and they are participating in different job fairs, which are part of the schools. So there is a hiring going on. And with this, the growth figures, we're not sure. It's again, we need to recalibrate those things based on our previous roadmap. Though those recalibrations have to happen all over again. There are some materials that you can find on the IBPAP website of our previous calibrations for the details and the figures regarding what we were thinking of now. But with this pandemic, we still have to recalibrate that. But definitely, there's hiring, there's still growth, and we will continue to support, the Philippine economy in whatever way we can. Whether it's the big companies that are part of IBPAP or the sectors that are, the home-based IT/BPM companies that are out there in the provinces. There's also those one, and the different government offices can probably give you more detail of those smaller companies that are happening. But, the future still looks blurry, but hopeful in a sense because of what has happened on the onset and with the help of, collaboration with government, that they allowed us to continue to work, and we're very thankful for that, and with this, with the help of the Filipinos, we'll get out of this together, and we do look forward, especially, Ella mentioning here about the mental health, each of us need that. Personally, I got if yours, Ben, is plants, somebody gave me a dog. So that's my way of, caring for somebody else or something else, as a, that helps you in your mental health in this time when you're secluded in one area. So we have our own, ways of coping with these things. And the industry definitely You know, with the help of our leaders in IBPAP and the different associations, we definitely will push to grow this industry in the Philippines with all your help. Thank you.
Then I think we should follow it up with a question posted in the chat box. And this is coming from Walter Balane from Bukidnon State University. I think this is more appropriately for Ms. De Rivera. Is there a chance of direct partnership with state universities and colleges for training and employment? I think you mentioned something to this effect earlier, but maybe if you can expound on that a little bit and how maybe that process is undertaken by your educational partners?
Well, definitely, there are partnerships that are happening, and the focus of these partnerships are with the companies in that area. Okay. Whenever a school comes to us, we look for companies that are in that area that they can partner with, because we don't want to bring all the talent to Manila. If they're in Bukidnon, then what's the nearest location beside them where their talent can go? And the partnership would be with them also. What are the different partnerships? You know, CHED does encourage internships with different companies, and some of our members do participate in those things, internship or job fairs and things like that. They have different opportunities for them, you know, and then there are some companies who have online courses as a prelude to employment, you know, and this is available for free. You can check out the website. There are online courses there that are available also. And these are very helpful. And I'm not specifically sure in Bukidnon if we do have companies there. We have to check that. But definitely, you know, I appreciate your willingness to be, you know, to inform your students about the IT/BPM industry. Just go to our website, shoot me an email, you know, talent at ibpap.org, and inform us so that we can inform you of the different activities that we will have, especially when we do have the industry awareness fair where your students can participate in this to get to know more about the industry so that your area will be prepared for the growth in there. Thank you.
Ms. De Rivera, I was just wondering, you mentioned that there's growth going into Davao, Cebu. I assume that may be explained by the level of infrastructure development there. But in terms of voice, which is I think what IBPAP wants to focus on, are there certain regions of the Philippines that are better than the others? I don't know, that are, I don't know, more, there's more talent in certain areas than the others?
Yeah, well, definitely we are number one in the voice, but the focus is, you know, the higher skills because they get higher pay.
Okay.
Right? Now, with the English proficiency, there has been a shift. Before, we had people who were like looking for the accent, you know, the twang, as they'd call it.
Right.
But nowadays, because we're looking globally and with more outsourcing happening, more people are comfortable, the twang is not necessary.
I see.
Anymore, you know. But communication, what do I mean by communication? The ability to relay the message correctly in the business language, which is English, right? Basically, most of the time. But then there's also those that you have companies that are looking for Japanese speaking, German speaking, Spanish speaking. So as we become a more globally oriented in the way we do things and the way we think, then even language has to be more global. In Europe, most people will know more than 3 languages. They know Spanish, German, and French, you know, aside from English probably. So the same way, Filipinos have the tongue for language because we have different dialects, 100 and plus, as many as our islands probably. Yeah. And we have the ability with our overseas workers who have gone abroad, you know, they are able to pick up the different foreign language if they could learn it better than just the intermediate level, you know, but to the point of a business level, right? Then that skill can now be used and harnessed by the IT/BPM industry.
Interesting. What are some of the more lucrative opportunities for foreign language speakers other than English? You mentioned Spanish, German.
Spanish, German. There's some who are looking for Japanese. You know, it's like the UN or the World Health, they give premiums for the different languages that you would use, but those are for specific companies
Right. And when you
and
say
different accounts.
when you say premium, are we talking about double of what an English-speaking agent would get, or more?
I would just say more. I would just say more.
Okay, all right, okay. I won't pursue that any.
I will leave the HR or the recruiters to answer that when they're being interviewed already.
Right. And I'm just wondering because, school is about to start and, for some people, they're going to be beginning their, career preparation 4 years down the road. Although I'm not sure, I wanted to ask you also if because of K to 12, if they have a good command of a foreign language now, is that, is a college degree still required for working in your sector?
Let me put it this way. College degree is definitely an advantage, especially if you want to get to the managerial level.
I see.
All right. Okay. But certifications are necessary also. The skills, the 21st century skills are all part of that. You have to put this all together. That's why we mentioned leadership skills, digital skills, and subsector skills. It's not just one or the other. It's a combination of all of this.
I see.
And that will bring the Filipinos forefront. We already have the empathy, the cultural affinity, play on that, grow on that, and then bring in the other skills, especially the IT skills, the digital skills. I think, that's an area of growth for most of us, including myself. The getting involved with the different tools that are coming up right now and being available for us, in cybersecurity, in AI, in robotics, in coding. They say kids can learn coding at a very early age. If we give them that extra time, then they can do that. And that will help them, honestly, not only in the IT BPM industry, but in any sector.
Last before, sorry, Ben, I don't mean to manipulate things, but I have one more in mind. You, Mr. Rivera, you mentioned that, the outsourcing industry is becoming more complicated. There are many more aspects of growth. You mentioned cybersecurity. I mentioned in your slides earlier, there was accounting there. There were many other fields. But where is the most exciting growth happening? Maybe this might be important for younger people, now entering their university years. What should they be, or what could they be looking at in terms of future opportunities 4 years from the road?
Yeah, definitely IT, primary, because we still lack a lot of IT people and skills in IT, right? There's a great growth in the healthcare management area. Okay, so we need a lot of that with everything that's happening. And then there's also growth in the creatives field, the animation and game development.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and some of this with the animation or the creatives, it could be that there's extra talent because that's a special skill,
right?
Creativity, but in the game development, there is IT part of the game development and especially in the game development, there's a lot of IT work there.
Mr. Delario, we're talking about mental health. As a parent with children virtually online most of the day. As a parent, sometimes I get concerned about what games they play. Is that factor into mental health issues as well, or am I just too old-fashioned for my own sake?
Yeah, I'm really not a mental health expert in the sense that I've done some researches on that aspect, but we've read certain findings in literature that somehow associate overuse of, let's say, gadgets to more possibility of having mental health problems. Maybe not now, but later on in life. So I think not only about playing games, but maybe really this kind of digitally infused world where our lives are really influenced a lot, if not even dictated by our gadgets and by the digital world. So maybe that's one downside that has to be monitored over the years, but definitely as what Zoe has been presenting, there's really a lot of opportunities that can be taken advantage of, especially in maximizing growth in certain subsectors in the IT BPO industry.
Ben, you want to, sorry, I've been keeping you from asking.
Just the discussion about foreign languages. This may be a hot tip for everyone. I happen to live in a place that has a little colony of French-speaking Africans, mostly Cameroonians, and they're very nice people. But apparently, French is one of the languages in demand. Like they're very nice people, but I assume that the country and the industry as a whole would probably prefer to be able to employ Filipinos to do that. So, perhaps, in your talent development, you might suggest to some people that French would be a very good language to pick up, because apparently that's somewhat in demand. I have another question for Mr. Delario. You had presented a very extensive list of recommendations to the industry, and also what government can do, and what the industry has requested from the government. But I'm curious about one thing you said. The technical assistance from DOLE in the development of mental health programs for companies. Does DOLE have that capacity? Are they able to provide that technical assistance, or is there some development that needs to happen there to be able to meet the demands of the industry? That's one question. And my second question also relates to the recommendations that you presented. The recommendations are great and very thorough. But as I read it, it's a set of recommendations. Companies, we would hope that they would adopt all or most of those. But like I explained to Secretary Bello earlier, there was just a very critical news story in major media outlet in the States about the industry and its care for its workforce here. And the implication was that some, not all, maybe not most, of the industry is cutting corners on that. So is there a carrot and stick kind of approach that you can take to get companies to really put the effort into this that they need to?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer the last question first. I think that an essential part of really moving forward the recommendations is our continuous communication and collaboration with, let's say, IBPAP, for instance, and associations that are part of the IBPAP. I think it will be essential to also come up with a certain action plan with partners like IBPAP in terms of translating the recommendations that we have established in our paper. We were in talks with the, I think, HR lead of IBPAP, it's Tess, and they were also excited about really reading the full paper, which is just published this year. So we will be happy to share it with them and also to work on something more concrete, and that is to move forward the recommendations in terms of implementing, if not all of them, just some of them that will be really be effective in terms of enriching the mental health interventions of our IT BPO companies. On the first question, I think that DOLE has really a rich experience and really immersed in terms of policy making. So maybe that's one of the assets that it can bring forward. when it tries to provide technical assistance. And in the process, of course, we have been immersed in multi-sectoral and even tripartite consultations. And that is, I think, a very important part in any policy-making process. In terms of certain technical assistance on mental health or certain technical expertise from mental health, I think that we can always tap established institutions or experts that can help us bring forward this kind of technical assistance to our IT BPO companies.
Okay. Yeah, because what you had explained seemed very hopeful, and I put myself in the shoes of a BPO company. It's like, look, this is something I know I need to do, but I don't know where to begin. So that's what I was curious about. Is if somebody comes to the DOLE and says, hey, help me out with this, I want to get this going. Are they ready to go? And I suppose, they could probably work it out. But I was just curious of how well developed that program is, given everything else that everybody has to deal with, under these trying circumstances we're in right now. Clint, do you have any more questions? I've kind of gotten to the end.
Yeah, just one, and then maybe we can ask our guests here to give us their final words. But Mr. Delario, your study earlier, you mentioned 78 respondents. I was just wondering if that is if that refers to individuals or firms, and then how was that done by random sampling? What is the total population that you were looking at, and then margins of error? And then finally, after that, maybe some final words from our guests.
Yeah, I remember that we were starting off with a certain estimate of number of BPO companies at that time, between 800 to 900 in our file. And then we came up with a target of an original target of 100 respondents in the form of companies. So the individuals answered it, but they represented on official basis their firms, their BPO companies. And it was still a good result, having 78 out of 100 in the middle of the a pandemic where many were still busy attending to their health needs. And
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you very much to both of you. Maybe if we can just have some final words. Maybe ladies first. Ms. De Rivera, you want to share with us your final thoughts and messages?
Well, to everybody out there, to the talent, to the Filipinos, definitely, if we are to face whatever is ahead of us, we have to upskill, reskill, and develop ourselves so that in whatever undertaking we take, whether it's being part of the IT/BPM industry or your business, whatever it is, we are ready, and that really needs our ability to be digitally ready in our leadership skills and in our specialization. So go ahead and be part of the IT/BPM industry.
Thank you. Mr. Delario?
Yeah, maybe along the lines of the theme of this forum, resilience and adaptability at all times. At all times, I just want to also say that continue these kinds of forums, continue what works for you in terms of coping mechanisms, and continue to talk about mental health in the public sphere. But at the same time, while we talk about these things, I think that there's really a need for us to challenge certain assumptions around mental health and challenge institutions, our workplaces sometimes, and even our communities in order to really bring forward the discourse on mental health.
Thank you. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, but unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. Ben, thank you very much. And again, to our guests, thank you very much. And please watch us again at the next Manila Times Business Forum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.